Welcome, councillors. Councillor Vorster was going to join us, but he hasn't turned up, so it might be a quicker meeting in regards to item 6 than we initially anticipated. So good morning, good afternoon. So we've got 3 start items, plus I haven't been notified of any conflicts of interest, but do we have any conflicts? Excellent. Would anybody like to move any of the start items? Hey, Councillor Gates and Councillor Patterson, what a team. All in favour? Carried. Thank you. So, councillors, we'll go to item 5, which is a proposal to make regulated parking amendment subordinated law local law number 1, 2021. Well, Councillor Hamill, at some stage, when you're chairing a meeting, you'll be able to do that. Councillors, does anybody have any questions regarding item 5? Excellent. So Councillor Hamill is moving it and Councillor Young is going to second it. Thank you. And Councillor Gates, would you like to wait for Councillor Hamill to speak to the motion, or would you like to just make your observation?
I'm more than happy to do that, sir.
Happy to pass over to Councillor Gates, Chair.
Yeah, clever move. Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. I'm just not able to support this, and it's just a philosophical position that I hold in regard to the parking around our stadiums. I come from a city that actually embraces the crowds around stadiums, and it, in my view, contributes to the attendance, and I just can't for the life of me understand why we restrict parking to the extent that we do, where there are wide roads and plenty of availability, and people have chosen to live in a precinct that's close to whatever sort of activity it is. So I won't be supporting it because it includes that element within this report.
Okay. Would anybody like to speak? Councillor Hamill, do you need to close? Excellent. So councillors all in favour? Against? Carried. Would you like to be noted, Councillor Gates? Yeah, okay. So councillors, item 6 is our city app, and we've got a presentation, and Kath, can I pass it over to you?
I'll just let Simon come into the room as well. So Simon's the acting manager for customer contact. Today's presentation is relating to a previous council resolution for options on how we could improve our current customer mobile app. So if I break down those components, there are various different things that we need to fix. Today was really about providing the committee an understanding of the approach that we are taking, and to ensure that you're comfortable with that approach. Simon will start. He's going to take you through where we've got to with the current app. We have made some additional changes to it, so we'll start there and then we'll talk about how we're going to progress in the future.
Afternoon, councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to present this to you today. I know that there has been a fair bit of discussion around the mobile app in general. So I'd just like to give you a bit of background firstly with respect to the challenges that we have had over the course of time. When I look back at 2013, it was the first time that we actually introduced a mobile app. That was by a provider by the name of City Sourced. They've since changed their name to Rock Solid, and we have had further discussions with them of recent weeks. However, the launch itself was really focused on graffiti itself, and over the course of 18 months or so, we ramped that up to ensure that we could build on some of the functionality that our customers were after. Typically, we would have 1,000 transactions per month coming through that app, and the top sort of 5 areas of focus for customers in our communities being graffiti, illegal dumping, parking, landscaping and cleaning, as well as abandoned vehicles. So the app was successful for the purpose of introducing that. That app itself was an overseas provider as well, and for the purposes of what we wanted it to do, it did that job rather well. We did find, however, customer demand is that they actually wanted some more functionality within the app itself. And with the introduction of our local government platform in I think it was 2017, a couple of years later, we then moved down the path of having a mobile app that had greater functionality for our customers, as per the dot points behind me here, around basically providing them the ability to use the app and make payments, applications, view licences, and a whole range of additional functionality. At the time, we thought that that was exactly what our customers wanted, but there were some functionality or usability issues with the app itself. And I'll talk through those briefly in a moment, but I guess the benefit of this app compared to the previous city-sourced app was when a customer was using the app, the information was actually auto-populating straight into our local government platform. So it was a direct feed into that platform, and from there, our staff in customer contact and other business units would actually still have to manually enter some of the information into our legacy systems as a result of a lack of integration between Pathway and other systems. However, it was certainly an advantage at the time over the city-sourced app. The picture you can see on the screen there at the moment, whilst cosmetically it doesn't look that attractive, the usability of it also over the course of time, we had a lot of feedback from our customers. Now, in an app store, generally speaking, you've got a star rating through to 5 stars, and our rating for this particular app across both stores was less than 2, and it remains less than 2 today. So you can clearly see that customers weren't adopting the app. At the time where I mentioned the city-sourced app had 1,000 transactions a month going through that, when we swapped across to the LGP app, we basically halved the level of transactions that are coming through to the contact centre. So customers, when using this app, on the front screen, there's about 5 buttons on that front screen and the real estate on the front screen, which simply are not functional unless you are a registered user, so unless you are logged in. And that in itself is probably off-putting to the vast majority of customers when they're opening an app to simply want to report something within the community for us to resolve. So they definitely found it difficult, very time-consuming. There was a lot of information that the city has requested across the different customer requests within the app itself. So in the app, there's around 15 customer request types, similar to the ones that I mentioned before, whether it be abandoned vehicles, illegal parking, etc. And a lot of those request types have up to 12 different questions within them. So it's very time consuming for a customer to be actually be committed to providing us the information that we require in order for us to respond in the existing app itself. In addition to that, the latitude and longitude coordinates on the app itself, whilst there is the ability to drag a pin on a map through this app, when the customer actually does that, it doesn't actually drill down or zoom into the actual location of where the specific issue is. What it does do is it provides the closest postal address of where that pin may be, and it's very, very difficult to use from a customer's perspective. So we were aware of this over the course of time, and we decided to make some changes. Unfortunately, that process itself did take a fair bit of time as we worked through with our provider to update this app into what you can see now on the screen, which is available right now. So we pushed that through the various app stores, and we did that on Thursday last week. So what we've been able to do in respect to that is remove a lot of the registered functionality, which in a sense we are of the view that customers weren't actually using, and it prevented the adoption of the app. We have definitely improved the look and feel of the app, but this is an interim measure to where we want to go into the future with a mobile app strategy for the city. We've simplified the home screen. We've made the terminology a lot easier. It's a lot easier even now when you're holding the device in your hand, using your right thumb if that's what you're doing, to whether it be make a payment or report a problem. And the functions that we believe are not being used have been removed completely. We've also added the bin day finder, which is a benefit for all of our customers to do that via the app. So we've really pared it right back. We've simplified it, and we are of the view we've done everything we possibly can within the constraints of the mobile app today. So there are some next steps which I'll hand across to Kath to talk you through around what we hope to be able to achieve with a provider and really have a beta version of a mobile app running in parallel with this one for a period of time before we transition across to a brand new app that meets our customers' expectations. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I think when we started to work through what were the next level of improvements for our app, one of the first things we understood was working with our current vendor that the technology isn't actually capable of doing any more changes. And examples I can give on that are we can't add logic, so if you answer one drop-down field, the next field will be a logical choice. We can't change the fields to actually be in a different order, so all of those things that would actually improve the customer experience. So as per the, I guess, the customer experience strategy, we went, well, how do we make life easier for our customers? Right now we know that report a problem is absolutely the number one thing they want to use the app for. And so we've looked at the ways of how do we then progress that using different technology. So when we looked at our options, we thought about different ways that we could think about using and doing software development. And ultimately, what we've decided was to leverage off a current contract that we have for software development. So that would allow us to work with a vendor that has experience in this space, and in particular, actually has experience in what we would call agile methodology. So traditionally here at council, we do very sort of long projects, and what we wanted to do was to change an approach where we actually did some minimal viable product and then built on it. So get that feedback, improve, and that iteration approach, rather than just taking an ages to build something that potentially then isn't necessarily what we wanted in the first place. So agile methodologies are something that we haven't done previously, so we're excited to do something where we can have something that you can see and actually feel very quickly in the process. So we looked at those different options, and ultimately what we wanted to do was take back that control. So one of the challenges we had, as Simon mentioned, even getting some very basic updates and going to a vendor to do those takes time. So we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to do those changes in a much more fast, responsive way based on the feedback that we know our customers will continue to give us and what is important to them, because that will always change over time. So as we chose that approach, we also then said, well, what are the things that we want to do in the short term as quickly as possible? So first thing we did, and sorry, this is a little bit of an eyesight test, is we did a current state analysis. And this is really where we go step by step. This is customer journey mapping. What is it like to actually do everything from a customer's perspective? And we create this as a customer journey map. So we look at our customer, we think through those things that they want to do, and we look at all of those pain points. How do we improve them to make life easier for our customers?
Yep. So, Kath, Councillor.
Sorry, and through you, Chair. So, Kath, just a question on that. When you, like you just said, all that you're trying to work out, are you working it out on a user that has your level of knowledge within apps and things like that, or are you working it out covering someone who's just starting to, somebody who's learning to mid-range sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the little diagram we've got there, the lady there is actually one of our customer profiles. So when we do customer journey mapping here at the city, we have a list of what we call customer profiles, where we try to replicate all of the different people that we have within our community. So in this example, the lady who's there, she likes to use an app. So she's comfortable with using technology to report things. Remember, when we do customer journey mapping, we need to think about all our different customers, because obviously we talk about channel of choice. We need to allow customers to use the channels they wish to work with us in the way that they want to. So in this example, the customer profile we're using is somebody who's quite comfortable to download an app and to use it to report a problem. But certainly when we do the wider thing, we look at the other scenarios as well. So you can see here, we started to think about how do we simplify that. And as Simon mentioned, some of these are just key fundamental technology issues that we can resolve. So the first one was allowing customers to report the problem and not have to necessarily tell us who they are. At the moment, you had to fill out all these customer details and information. So we flip it around. You actually report the problem first, and then if you want to tell us who you are so you're kept informed, then you have that option. The other key thing for us was about that location. So one of the parts of the report was about also helping our back office areas. So it's not just about that front end immediate putting the request a problem in. We have to resolve the problem as quickly as possible. We know that's what's important to customers, not just reporting it, but ultimately how we fix whatever it is they've asked us to do. So how do we make sure we give good information to the back office? And it's a very basic one, giving them that geolocation. So if they're in a park and it's about something that's within a park, they can actually say where in the park it is, versus at the moment, the current technology actually is underpinned by our local government platform, which uses property, because that's what we base our rating off. So changing that allows us to actually be more accurate, and then that immediately resolves all of those additional questions that we're asking. So if we actually know where in the park it is, we don't have to ask the customer to tell us that. Similarly, when they're taking the photos, we can get a lot of the information from that. So it resolves it from the customer side, and then it helps us allow to get that information to our back office area to do whatever it is that they need to do as well. Probably the other thing I mention is that and I haven't got it on this slide, but certainly other things that we're looking at in the future, so we have some stretch goals as part of this, will be items like using QR codes. So not even having to necessarily take the photo, they scan it and we know what asset is. So those are the things that we're also thinking about in the future. Similarly, if they have a problem, click to call, things like that, so they can just immediately change channel and say to us, hey, I'm trying to do something and I actually want to talk to someone. And that's really important for things such as large water leaks. We don't want someone to necessarily put that in a mobile app. We probably want to know about it really quickly. So there's an example with the QR code at the bottom and how that would potentially look in the future. So how are we doing it? I mentioned our agile process. Again, another ISET test. So hopefully you can read that yourselves. But we're doing it in 3 different sprints. So we start with basically our initiation phase, and then what we'll go into is sprint 1, 2, and 3. And you can see that we're actually building on it. So in the first sprint, we come together, we create and report a problem for a couple of our key types. We have a look at it, then we go into the next one. So it very much is a much more, I'm going to say, fast, agile, and responsive. So at the end of the first sprint, we have a showcase, and we show people this is what it's going to look like. We get that feedback, and then we can go back. And similarly, when we put this into the App Store, we want to actually coexist, because we want that co-creation as well from our customers. We're going to use the term beta. I think it's quite a relatively well-known, understood that beta means you're in a kind of testing phase, and therefore we'll differentiate between the 2 apps there to say, hey, this is the new app that's coming, tell us what you think about it. And we'll use those feedback mechanisms to continue to improve it, so that it really is co-creation with our customers, rather than us always making those assumptions about what they tell us works for them. And that's it from questions.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, and through the chair, I've just got the app up on my phone at the moment. I've just noticed like location. So the actual location where we used to be able to put a location point on it has been removed, and it seems to just give the location as Broadbeach. are we relying on the user to be more detailed whereabouts in Broadbeach would be, or?
In the current app?
Yeah, correct. So I'm not sure if this is the current one we're saying we're going live, but I just went through it.
Yeah.
And it gave me Broadbeach and it said give more details. But for me, I'm just being a person, Broadbeach, and it's near the tree, near a swing.
Yeah.
My question would be, how would you react to that when it arrived at your end?
For today's situation? So through you, Mr Chair, what we would do in that situation is if we can actually continue a request, if we have enough information, we obviously then create the work order for that asset. If there's not enough information and the customer's told us who they are, we call them. And we say to them, can you provide us more information if they know it? So certainly in the future app, the intent is that we would use the geolocation that comes from the phone rather than asking anyone to do that. Now you can still do the, use my location and it will immediately do that. Or you can also still always manually override that. You don't necessarily always want to use the location you're at when you're reporting it. So we need to still give those two options. But certainly the challenge we have at the moment is when you try and do it in a park, it will go to the nearest property because that's rateable. And that was one of the key pieces of feedback we got from the back office, that was one of their challenges.
Councillor Bowden-Lumsden.
Thanks, Chair. Just wondering, with the back-end side of things, once someone's reported a problem, how do we intend to improve that side of things? So my understanding is at the moment, if you raise something, it just goes to the customer contact line. It'd be the same as if you sent an email to mail at Gold Coast. Is that correct?
So the initial sprints will be the same. Certainly from our perspective, there are then two other components for it. So the first one is how we integrate our systems, and that's a different technology that we have within our ICT area, which is about how do we connect and move that information without that manual double handling. So we need to improve it first, and then we can do the integration. And the third component into it is then when it goes into that back-end system. So at the moment, we use SAP to do our maintenance of our assets, and we use one component of that called SAP Works Manager. That is actually end of life and is due this year for replacement. So we'll be working with Michael Ham and the City Maintenance and all the other areas about, now we have a different product coming in, how do we also improve that component? So, and that's the end-to-end process, because as we know customer experience isn't just reporting a pothole, it's fixing the pothole. So we'll do the customer component as part of this. Then we'll have integration where we bring together the actual applications to talk to each other, and then we'll look to improve the back-end technology to meet those business requirements.
Okay.
Happy with that?
Yep. Okay, so it sounds like it'll make it more straightforward for the customer. It'll streamline the process. It'll take less staff on our end as well to triage it to where it needs to go. That's all correct?
That's certainly the intent. So we certainly, from a customer's perspective to begin with, we'll look at improving the component, and then we will work through how do we make sure end-to-end process flows so that those go to the right area to fix it as quickly as possible.
Okay. And if I may, Chair, timeline, on that, because you said SAP's obviously supposed to be updated, you said end of this year?
So SAP has lots of different functionality within it, and one of the components is the Works Manager component, which is where we put work against an asset. That is end of life next year, and this year is the initiation of the project to replace it. So the first component, which is the mobile app, we're hoping to have the beta version in the stores by September. Integration will then come after that, and then the SAP, which is a bigger project in itself, will be future. So it won't be an immediate fix. It will take time, but certainly that is absolutely the plan, is to continue to improve all those different components so that we can improve the whole.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, that the app could start now and then the integration could come later. That didn't need to wait for... Okay.
Councillor Tyler.
Thank you. And I think touching on what Councillor Bowden-Lumsden said is obviously it's that integration of what data we collect and how it gets put into our other systems and manage double handling it. And I think I've mentioned once before, a great tool for the public to use, and then obviously what resources it take and integration I think is really important for a product like this. But down the track, is there any views of how it can be used at other levels? So I've mentioned even for a councillor to go out and do a customer request. For me, unless there's other process I'm not aware of, it takes an admin staff to actually then register it and upload it, and the ability for someone like ourselves to upload a council request at that point to save internal resources, and also our staff out in the field. I'm not sure of what their ability is as well.
Some councils use the app.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the future mobile app strategy was one of the components of the customer experience program. Certainly, there's definitely a feeling there's a multitude of apps within the city. Certainly, just one app that does everything probably isn't right for us. And we have discussed potentially having things such as a counsellor app. So back in the day, Telstra have a VIP app, and they use it for the story they tell is about the barbecue conversation. So you go to a barbecue and they say, "What do you do?" And they say, "Oh, I'm a senior vice president at Telstra," and everyone goes blah and tells them their problem. So they actually created an app. So there was like a senior thing that would be an escalation to say, "Hey, this has come from a senior person. You know, make sure it gets the priority it needs to." So those kind of different ways to workflow things, and whether that's an app or a different workflow, we haven't necessarily work through that, but there's absolutely opportunities. The mobile app strategy is about understanding how many do we want to have. We do 800 different services. We don't want 800 apps, but there are logical grouping of information. The other thing I think that we need to consider is the city doesn't actually have to own the app. We might have information that we can provide that either another agency or is private, and we are actually enhancing the information by using our open source data. So there's different ways that we can look at all of those different things, but that's what the strategy would deliver on.
Councillor Young.
Thank you, and through the chair. Kath, it was quite interesting that you said about it was the amount of information that you were having, or I think it could have been Simon as well, the amount of information that you've actually got to give, and a lot of residents actually, we find through the office, don't want to give all of their details to report a leaking pipe or a, you know, whatever. So it was sort of, I guess, reassuring to hear that they've got a civic duty, or they've got a community conscience. They want to report something, but they don't necessarily need to hear back about it, and they don't necessarily want this to be not able to report something. So I think on that side of things, to shorten that period down, we may get a lot more uptake for it, because a lot of people don't want to give their personal details every time. They have to do that when they purchase. So.
For you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, and that's definitely the feedback we've had, and we actually kind of try to separate those out into two different user stories now. So you've got customers where something's happened. It might be, you know, illegal parking outside their house. Mm-hmm. They're invested in it and they want to know if we fixed it, versus I'm doing civic duty, which is I care about the Gold Coast and I want to do my part to make sure it's maintained and safe and so forth. Mm-hmm. So that's absolutely the reason that we took that into account.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Thanks, Chair. I think it's very important that we do this update, and it's definitely want to see a functioning app. It'll be great for residents, ease of them. It's a lot easier to take a picture and tap a few buttons than it is to call an office or wait on the council contact line. As Councillor Young just kind of raised, some people are happy to just raise something, feel like they're done and be done with it. Others do want to see the outcome. And just because there has been, I don't know if it's triage issues or what it is with the previous app, we'll have residents contact, say we raised it on the app, this is the number. We've had to email on to a certain team, and then in the end we've had to raise a CR as well. So that's why I was curious about the back end side of things. I was wondering with the new app if there could be something like the Domino's pizzas where it says your order's been processed, your order's here. If they could have something about which team it's with, or if there's a concern, they know where it's up to. Because at the moment when we've had residents contact our office about something they've raised on the app, they don't know where it's gone. They weren't able to fully state maybe who it's been sent to. Yeah. So that's it. If we know, is it being processed? Is it with the pothole team?
A little bit of information about their driver. Yeah.
Your pothole is now filled. Yeah. So.
Certainly in the initial 3 sprints of work, we haven't contemplated that. It's really about paring it back and getting those basics right. To do expectation management and transparency is absolutely fundamental. It's one of the key principles. Tell us what's happening, and knowing if you want to be involved, where we are in the process, how long the process will take. That requires the integration to the back area for us to get the information from that back office area to the customer. Yep. So certainly that's a future state enhancement, but it's certainly something that would go into our design principles, because if we don't keep customers informed, they generally contact us again. So just to find out, and that's a duplicate inquiry that we don't really need.
Yep. Okay, just because, I don't know how all the different systems interact, but I know the CR line does say whichever team of council it's sat with, so I thought that might be helpful to a customer. And if the back end stuff's sorted, obviously ideally it won't go through a few sets of hands. That when someone raises something on the app, it'd go directly to whatever the actioning team is. So
yep, correct.
Okay. I've got Councillor Tozer, then Patterson, then Taylor.
Is there, when we use an app, is there a unique device identifier, even though it doesn't identify the person? Do we know the device? Is there a unique fingerprint?
Correct. The IMEI in a mobile device is the unique identifier for a mobile phone.
So is there a way for us to utilise our knowledge of that to, identify kind of priority users? And maybe that priority user might be someone who regularly uses the app, or maybe that regular user is a councillor or a senior employee.
We haven't, through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't contemplated that as a part of those first key sprints. Certainly, in the future, if you were looking at having customer identity, you would, in their customer profile, you would actually capture things like social media and IMEIs and so forth. So you would always know it's the same customer that is calling, and then you can actually have an experience where you know if they've started in the mobile, who they are in the future. So it's technically possible. We don't have all the technology capabilities to store that information in the right place. And certainly to begin with, we would need to make sure we are collecting that information in a way that's appropriate and understood. Yeah.
And I think not so much for the broader customer, but for that comment, the VIP app for Telstra kind of occurred to me that I spend, sometimes at community events, I spend an inordinate amount of time trying to use an app or curate an email that makes sense. Whereas if you recognised my message to the system by my device, like the same way that like the city knows my car's registration, and I seem to avoid parking tickets if I'm at work events or whatever. I don't know how that works, but I seem to have not got parking tickets for a long time.
Councillor Tozer, I think it's because you follow the instructions on the sign.
I do, yeah. That's true, yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Sorry about that. Bad example. Yeah. But the idea is that the identifier in my phone or in a set of devices that are city devices might be either prioritised or captured in a different way or processed in a different way. It makes more sense than us having to fill out all the details of who we are every time some sort of action has to occur. But you're saying that technology does exist?
For you, Mr. Chair, the technology does exist. We don't necessarily have some of that today. I think certainly from my perspective, as part of the mobile app strategy, I think one of the things that would be important is also to understand the use cases for a VIP app. So some of them will be escalating of maybe report a problem, but I'm pretty sure that if we engage with you, you would have other use cases that you might want to use it for as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're using the same app, but recognising it would be the right way. It might be, hey, well, actually, there's all these other things that we want to do, particularly for that user story. So there's different ways that we could get to that. But yeah, absolutely, having recognition of who someone is something that you can do. Yes.
Councillor Patterson.
Happy to move it, Chair.
Okay. So we've still got some questions going, unfortunately. So Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. And through the Chair, how many different operational programs does the city have, and how many would these have to connect to? So we could have 4 different operational systems through the organisations that's doing their individual role, where this information is captured and it's obviously has to be updated at a certain point, and it's obviously managed at different levels. how many of these programs do we have, and how many actually integrate together to make a streamline of capturing this information, that we're not having to constantly update to get information in and back out?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the mobile app, there are two key systems that information normally goes into: the local government platform, which is Pathway, and our asset register, which is our SAP. So those are the two ones. But that said, we have a multitude of systems. We have over 200 applications here at the city. Integration is something that we have started to do. We have begun with our HR systems and integration in that place, and certainly we intend to look at integration and bringing those systems together over the next couple of years. That's part of our ICT roadmap.
Councillor RBL.
Thanks, Chair. It was more just in regards to Councillor Tozer's comments. I do understand the VIP thing, but I don't know if that's ideal. I don't know. My perspective is more just we need a reliable, efficient app. If something was urgent or more substantial, I wouldn't have thought an app's probably the best avenue for it. Like, I've used the app myself and I've been trying to encourage residents to, but if it's a pothole or some graffiti, those minor kind of things make sense. But if it's something more substantial, I'd probably prefer them speak to someone or speak to my office or whoever the relevant person is in council, as opposed to, yeah. That's just my thoughts.
Okay.
Through the chair on that. Is that working? Thank you. As part of a future app, we would certainly like to be able to see the business rules within the app that enable a customer to click to call. So if they are using the app and they want to submit something which they feel is quite urgent, they would have that option available to them.
So you had on one of your slides the new app design report a problem where you had a Q code. Mm-hmm. And I think that even though he can't be here today, Councillor Vorster struck out with a Q code of his own for something in Varsity. So is that not dissimilar to what he was looking to do on that asset?
Mr. Chair, I haven't actually spoken to Councillor Forster on that particular issue, but conceptually it sounds like it's the same thing.
Yeah, so I think from memory it was a tunnel where there was being tagged and he wanted people to be able to easily log a service request. So I'm not too sure of the finer details, but he invented something. So it might be between now and full council, if you could do me a favour and reach out to Councillor Vorster and ask him whether or not that was a path that he was interested in. Yes. That would be appreciated. So, councillors, are there any other questions? Councillor Patterson, did you want to... So there are some minor changes to the initial officer's recommendation, but so you're happy to move it. Would anybody like to second it? Hey, Councillor Taylor's going to second it. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to it?
Our customers contacting us is one of the most fundamental aspects of the council working, and to make that as easy as possible for them is really, really vital, and this certainly goes a long way to doing that. So thank you very much.
Give the people what they want. Would anybody like to speak against the app? Anybody like to contribute anything more? Excellent. We're not going to close. We're just going to vote on it. All in favour? Carried. Thanks, Kath. So, councillors, item 7 is a closed item, and it is largely because it deals with the movement of staff, I'm assuming. Industrial matters affecting employees. So I'm happy to move to closed and seconded Councillor Hamill because it involves the corporate structure report, and it's only fair that we actually make a decision in closed if it impacts on staff. So all in favour? Okay, we'll move to closed. So we're streaming, Matt. Thanks. So item 7, I'll move it. I won't read it out loud. Councillor Pauline Young's going to second it. Anybody have any comments? Excellent. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Councillors, is there any general business? Excellent. We'll call it